Hello, I'm Dr. Angie McCartney.
And I'm Ruth McCartney.
Welcome to TeaFlix,
where each episode's intimate conversation features a fascinating guest across the spectrum of Beatles world, pop culture, Grammy winners, the music industry, chefs, producers, music stars, actors, and more. So bottoms up and join us as they spill the tea on TeaFlix.
Yeah.
And it says we are live once again. That is a fabulous thing. So, good morning.
Good morning, ladies in red. I'm having a baby, so I'm staying in bed.
Oh no. God, let's not go there just yet. So, good morning, our little TeaFlixers. We hope you've got either your kettles on or your corkscrews out or summit, as they say in Yorkshire. And I am just waiting for confirmation from our fearless leader upstairs that he can see us. So,
we're good.
Great.
Okay.
We're good. Today's guest, we've been juggling schedules. He's a super crazy busy man, but he has very generously made time. And thanks to Debbie, Gendler, and Candace in his office for sorting it all out with the technicals and everything. British born,
I know.
Andrew Solt started his career in 1970 as a producer at David L. Wolper's production company. He continued to expand his role as a producer, working on no less than nine Emmy-nominated shows, including the Mississippi Reluctant Ally, shared the win with Jacques-Yves Cousteau and his son Jean-Michel Cousteau. In 1979, he produced his first music show, Heroes of Rock and Roll. From there, he continued with 25 by 5, The Continuing Adventures of the Rolling Stones, Elvis, The Great Performances, This is Elvis, Imagine, John Lennon, and the History of Rock and Roll. And in 2001, Andrew won a Grammy for Best Long-Form Music Video for producing and directing Gimme Some Truth, the making of John Lennon's Imagine album. In 1990, Andrew Solt founded Sofa Entertainment Incorporated and acquired the Ed Sullivan Show and edsullivan.com from the Sullivan family. Sofa Entertainment was entrusted with the Ed Sullivan Show library to ensure these cultural milestones remain accessible for generations to come. After a fortuitous meeting between Andrew and Bob Precht, the archive was purchased from Elizabeth Sullivan Precht, who was the daughter of Ed Sullivan and the wife of the longtime Sullivan Show producer, Bob Precht, Ed Sullivan Precht. So you're learning new stuff all the time. In 2020, Josh Solt, Andrew's son, left Google to lead Sofa Entertainment as CEO. With Josh's experience in the tech world and digital space, he's led the company at the intersection of visual content, music, and technology. Josh is responsible for curating the Ed Sullivan Show brand to evolve to reach new generations the way that they listen nowadays and participate and engage with content. Sofa, S-O-F-A, Entertainment is the copyright holder of over 1,000 hours, including over 10,000 performances of original Ed Sullivan programs, as well as over 150 hours of newly created programming in the form of documentaries, television specials, home video releases, and programs for networks as well as streaming partners. The Ed Sullivan Show has found an entirely new digital audience where its collection of celebrated TV moments has amassed more than 3 billion with a B views across digital platforms, 1 million YouTube subscribers, and 1 billion views on Facebook. New programming is constantly being created and distributed via Roku, Tubi, Pluto, Prime Video, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Pandora, SiriusXM, and all the usual suspects. The Ed Sullivan Show showcased a wide variety of pop culture from the worlds of music, comedy, and novelty, and much more. Sunday Best is a film. If you haven't seen it, it's streaming. You must see it. It's out right now. And more recently, finally, after years of trying, Andrew will tell us, Mr. Ed Sullivan was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So without further ado, I would love to present to you our guest, Mr. Andrew Solt. Good morning.
Hello, Andrew.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time.
Finally.
My pleasure. It's an honor.
Let's start at the end. Obviously, the most recent thing is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. But what was the genesis of that? How long ago did you apply?
Well, you don't really apply. It was in the beginning run by Ahmed Erdogan and Jan Wenner. And I knew Jan, and I would call him up, starting after a couple of years of being involved with the Ed Sullivan Show, to say, why isn't Ed Sullivan in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
And he said, it's never going to happen. And I said, why? Why would that be the case? And he said, well, it wasn't a real rock and roll show. It was a variety show. And Dick Clark was all rock and roll. And
Ah.
so was, Don Kirshner, and there were
Right.
others, but it won't get through. So it didn't. And I tried every couple of years, every 2 or 3 years, and said, it's the music in the show and the artist in their prime, and the fact that it had all this incredible work, whether it's Motown or whether it's Elvis Presley or whether it's the Beatles and then the British invasion and then all of the music that was part of our lives.
Yeah.
It got better and better, mainly because of Bob Precht having done such a great job from 1960 until 71 when the show went off the air.
Right.
But it was really a surprise because I thought it'll never happen. And then, I let go of it and I thought, well, that's that, life goes on. And suddenly, bing, bang, boom, it happened. And the good folks at Universal Music, I think, helped a bit. And it was Ed's time, and he had such an incredible impact on us. And the biggest impact of all the genres on the show was music.
Of course, and who would have known who Tessie O'Shea was if it wasn't for Ed Sullivan, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his show was global, It's global now.
Yes.
He opened the American living room. Everybody watched on Sunday night at
Sunday
8
night.
o'clock on CBS. And families would be pulled together because there was one TV in the home.
That's
And when
right.
the show started, there were only 40,000 TVs. They were all in New York, and there was no such thing as a national broadcast. So, it was, in the very, very beginning of television, and Bill Paley ran CBS, and he had the radio company. And then he said, I want to be on the television thing. It's going to be huge. And he created what was known here as the Tiffany Network.
Right.
It was always winning all the awards. It was always top of the ratings. It was always high quality television.
Yeah. And CBS was originally Columbia, right? The Columbia Broadcast System is what I think it stood for. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Exactly. No, you're right.
Yeah. Because it's like the old RCA, HMV, His Master's Voice. Do you remember the dog sitting next to the microphone? We had some old RKO you used to work for.
RKO. When they first started home video, I worked for them.
Yep. And that was Radio Keith Orpheum.
That's right.
See?
Yeah.
See,
and I loved their record store in London, right on Piccadilly, near Piccadilly Circus. They had that huge record store. And I loved, I went to London almost every 2 years, starting at the age of 10 or 11. And my grandmother lived there. And I only had one grandparent. And it was a great way of seeing her. And then I always loved Europe. And it was, London is where I was born. And it has a very special place in my heart. But when the Beatles hit, and I couldn't understand exactly Liverpudlian, the accent, that was another transition. But then I tuned my ear and I said, I get it. And they were so clever, they were so funny, and most of all, they were so brilliantly talented that they changed the whole course of music history, as we well know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you're from Liverpool, the sense of humor is just in your DNA, because when you think about when the Beatles grew up, it was post-war, it was a black and white world. They were all, I mean, when you think about it now, to think of them as war babies, but they were all born during the war, during the Second World War, and they grew up playing on bomb shelters and whatever in a world of black and white. So if you weren't able to laugh and be self-effacing, you probably would have just jumped off the roof. You know, it's just anyone you meet from Liverpool on the whole, if you meet somebody miserable and they say they're from Liverpool, you ask them, "Are you really?"
Really?
It can't be. Yeah, it's true. And it's also the music came in through the port.
That's
it
right.
was so important, so they could get the American records somehow, and then the artists and the Beatles and the Stones and everybody who was interested in music, went from Lonnie Donegan to what's this American rhythm and blues stuff? What's going on in America? Because America was kind of at the forefront of the music, and it influenced a lot. And these guys who I adore their music, the Everly Brothers,
Oh,
they
yeah.
were from, they're more beloved in Britain than they are in America in a certain way, but they were American, but their English background played a very important part, and they're so popular, worldwide and influenced everybody. As my son Josh said, they were the great influencers because they influenced everybody from Bob Dylan to the Beatles to, all of the great acts that came
I
out
know
of them,
Paul has
Simon and
been,
Garfunkel and everybody.
Paul has been quoted as saying that he and John, when they first started, used to call each other Phil and Don, that they were their
Yes.
idols, never dreaming
Yeah.
that they'd either get to meet them or whatever.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
a large part of the music coming from the port, too, was this sort of little clique in Liverpool at the time, obviously being homosexual was against the law in that day and age, which is ridiculous when you think about it now. But, there was a secret clique of gay men in Liverpool, Brian Epstein obviously being one, and Bob Wooler being another. And there were certain pubs down near the docks where the big American ships would go that was sort of known for where you could go and, meet a nice guy from America. And that's where Bob Wooler would get the music, the 45s, and bring and play as the DJ at the Cavern. And that's what started influencing John and Paul. So if it hadn't been for this sort of secret gay underground clique, who knows if Bob would have met up with these sailors coming in from America who would say, hey, show me around your town and I'll give you a bunch of records from what's going on in America, because you can't get American radio in those days.
Right.
And so when you think about just that tiny wrinkle in the fabric of society and how it influenced so much, it's just incredible, really. It's just amazing. So so back to sort of not necessarily the beginning, but
What originally drew you to working with archival television and music content?
Well, I loved music, and I never saw television until I was 11. I grew up in South Africa. We couldn't get into America. My uncle was a screenwriter, and we tried, and it just wasn't possible. So we were living there, and my uncle came to South Africa, and he said, "You got to get the boys out of here," to my parents. And we didn't realize what was happening, but my father sold his business. We moved to Johannesburg because he had to for 2 years. He sold to a British company. And we came out, and I left the nice British schools I went to. I had a very nice childhood. I mean, South Africa, apartheid was horrible. I saw terrible things as a child that I can never get out of my mind. But the way, it was actually the same month, 1948, in February, the Nationalist Afrikaner Party took over and instituted apartheid. And that's when I arrived as a baby, and I was only 6 weeks old or something. And we went to Cape Town. And when I got into, the music as a child, I loved music, and my father and mother loved music, and they had great albums, and I was listening to Ella Fitzgerald and Sammy Davis Jr. and Sinatra and everybody. And and stuff that, but then when it came to Elvis, they would let Love Me Tender in, but they wouldn't let Rock Around the Clock in. I mean, not Rock Around the Clock, I mean Jailhouse Rock. Rock Around the Clock was Bill Haley's worldwide success.
That's right.
And that changed everything in 55. But when I got here and I turned on the TV in the hotel room, we were in New York after we were in Europe for about 3 weeks, and I saw 7 channels, and there was something for the kids and something for the, the Westerns and for game shows. And then I thought, how does anybody ever leave the room? How do people go to school? I mean, this is the most exciting place. And unlike the BBC, which was 2 channels,
I know.
It was like Nirvana.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Hullabaloo. Diana's just saying Hullabaloo is another great old show, right?
Oh, yeah, another great one.
And so obviously when I think you saw all those shows and heard all that music growing up, it must have just imprinted on you that when you finally got the opportunity to get into the business, especially the Ed Sullivan Archive, not just creating the films that you produced and directed, but then going back and being the custodian, the historic, the keys to the kingdom of this archive. It must have been quite a thrilling prospect.
It was totally unexpected. I had worked on, as you mentioned, a couple of the credits, histories of rock and roll, or
Right.
Heroes of Rock and Roll was the first history of rock and roll. And my former partner, Malcolm Leo, and I did that film, and we involved 20th Century Fox. And it was, always Sullivan that had the best quality stuff, the greatest artists in their prime, giving it all live on stage, because it was do or die, and they all, the great ones succeeded, and it was a amazing on-ramp to, immortal performances that we still can enjoy today.
Yes.
So it was not for sale. I actually asked Bob Precht, after I went to a meeting with him and his associate about licensing Elvis footage for a thing I was doing with Disney Home Video, and the price had gone up. And as I was leaving, and I said, Bob, what are you doing with the library now? And he said, well, I've tried a couple of things. It's been quite difficult. He said, do you have any ideas? And I blurted out, yes. I had never thought about it. And we had lunch, and he suggested that we do some kind of a deal where, we could work together, and I would have the library for 10 years, and then it would flip back to him, and the shows I created I would keep. It was a convoluted thing, but it ended up turning out to be, when I spoke to his attorney, Ronald Greenberg, who was a wonderful man and best friend to Bob Precht, he said, because I wanted to meet him, I was working in New York in 1989, and I said, can I come and introduce myself and meet you? And he said, sure. So I did, and long story short, they said they'll never sell it, but they'll do this deal. And then I said, well, what if I made a good offer? He said, well, it'd have to be really substantial. So the library wasn't for sale. It was just, we were going to do a thing together. And then I realized that Bob really wanted to let go of it, and that's what happened. So they entrusted it to me.
Wow.
Because I'd worked with Elvis, gotten rights from Bob Dylan, who walked off of the show, unfortunately, and then the Rolling Stones, and the Beatles.
Wow.
And it just is a treasure trove, and it's an American. It's a unique show. There's nothing like it.
Absolutely.
Well, now it's been obviously preserved color, digitized, and we can see it in color. It's absolutely, it's a digital icon. It's like the Sphinx or a pyramid, isn't it, of the digital world? Yeah. When you think about how many shows were there or how many seasons were there altogether?
Well, it ran for 23 years. It started in June of 1948 when television started. I mean, literally, they knew nothing. And Ed Sullivan had been doing these charitable shows called the Harvest Moon Ball, I should say. And he ended up being known by, his column. He had been a sports writer. He had grown up in, been born in Harlem, moved to Port Chester, and he just... was passionate about this one thing, which was he could do the show. They gave him no money. Marlo Lewis was his producer, and they kind of invented television, and Ed couldn't perform like a normal comedian or a dancer or singer might. And what he did was he could produce very well, and he selected top talent, and he had a golden gut, and he knew instinctively who would maybe make it. And he was also principled. He made sure that Paley gave him full control of who he put on the show, and he loved Black artists, and he loved foreign artist. He loved giving the global view to the American audience.
Yeah. Diversity in practice all those years ago, when you think.
Exactly.
Without a hashtag like DEI, he was just quietly doing it and bringing it into living rooms and bringing it into the culture. It's like Norman Lear, same thing, right? On the writing side, he sort of held a mirror up to society and said, this is all who we all are. This is how it should be.
Exactly.
And I don't know that Ed Sullivan gets enough historical credit for that kind of diversity and inclusion and humanitarianism, really, when you think about it. He was just trying to level the playing field for everybody.
That's true. And this film, Sunday Best, which was produced by Ed Sullivan's granddaughter, Margot Speciale, she did a great job. And the director, who was Sasha Jenkins, was brought on. I think he was the second director, and he had an instinct, a feel, an editorial gift, and he made a fantastic film. And sadly, he died just before it came out on Netflix. So he passed at 53 or 4, and he was a great journalist, great filmmaker, did incredible films on numerous subjects. Like he did a great 3-hour documentary on Louis Armstrong, but he did so many, and he really was gifted, and sadly he didn't see it happen. But we don't forget him, because without him, this conversation wouldn't even be happening.
Well, what a legacy, though. And if you're just tuning in, or if you missed the top intro, you have to see Sunday Best. You can see it on Netflix now. It's truly amazing. So going back to the archives.
Yeah. Are there any hidden gems within the Ed Sullivan Show archive you feel deserve more attention today?
Well, my son has done a marvelous job of bringing it into the contemporary world with the new technology. I could not have done this. When streaming happened, after we had made 100 hours of shows, we got all rights for television, and then it turned out there was something new called electronic television, and we needed electronic rights, so we had to re-clear all the music, which was about 1,200 songs. But we did, and 99+% of the publishers said yes, this will be an upgrade. So that's how we did it, and we always paid the artists, and we always paid the director, and Ed wrote his own intro. So it was a labor of love on his part. It was his raison d'etre. It was the reason he lived. He lived for Sunday nights at 8. And when you know a little bit about live television and the stakes, and you're going from a dress rehearsal 3 hours, and then suddenly having to cut some acts or change some things or change the order of talent, etc. He had an incredible instinct, and he had an instinct like a journalist, because he was, for what would be big. And he knew that the Beatles would be big. Even Bob Precht wasn't sure that 3 Sunday nights in a row in February of 1964, which is called February Sweeps, the old rating period, that it would be a little, it had never been done. Even Cliff Richard, he hit the top 20 in America with a song, but no British act had come over and just swept us away. But the music had arrived in September of 1963.
That's right.
And then President Kennedy got killed in November.
That's right.
And the country went into what I call a depressive swoon of some sort. I mean, it was so upsetting. I mean, I was like 14, 15, and I'd never seen our parents' world crumble like that. And those 4 days in November. Anyway, the Beatle timing and their music and how uplifting it was and how different it was, and the fact that they kind of were waiting cleverly for to be a #1 song on the American charts, it all lined up perfectly, because Brian Epstein came in November of '63 and signed something on November 11th, I think.
11,
and then it was 11 days before the Kennedy assassination. And, it brought us out of that depression a bit, at least the youth. It was so different, so new. we'd heard the music, but we had not seen them,
Right.
sing and dance or move. We didn't know what they sounded like.
Yeah.
We only heard the music, and boy or girl, we were all singing it.
Well, and I think, that when President Kennedy was assassinated, yes, immediately, of course, it's a mourning period. It's a horrible thing to happen. America, then you were in what you call holiday season. It must have been the most miserable Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year in anybody's memory. And then all of a sudden in February, when enough respectful time has passed to, okay, we're going to lift our heads up and breathe, what's next? Along come the mop tops, right? Perfect timing.
Exactly. Perfect timing. And like life, everything is timing.
Yeah.
You cannot, plan it exactly. It happens. And the Beatles were so different, and the music was so great, and we could buy the albums. But even Capitol Records over here, they didn't want to have them.
No,
I
And then
know.
the head of EMI came over and said, listen, here's some money. Put in money to do some promotion for these guys. You're going to see they're going to be a success. And of course, I Want to Hold Your Hand was #1, and She Loves You. And once the music started coming into the country, you couldn't get enough of it. There were 3 different albums, 3 different labels. They had been turned down by everybody.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In England.
And in fact, George used to send our dear departed friend Louise Harrison, his sister. She lived in Benton, Illinois, and he used to send her little acetates and stuff. And she would be in her car driving up and down to Chicago, knocking on radio station doors and, trying to get them played in late mid to late 63. So Louise did her part as well.
And the fact that she was a woman meant she was not very welcome.
Yeah, no, I mean, who's this chick knocking with a funny accent, knocking on the door,
With her
saying,
brother's record.
will you play me brother's group? But
yeah, she was very nice. She used to come in here every so often, and I loved her stories. I mean, it was amazing that George was in America before the others, and then came back.
Yeah,
And then he almost missed the show because of his laryngitis.
that's right.
And it was all happening so fast. But New York was transfixed and transformed by their arrival, and the music was ever present. It was like just part of the gestalt. It was the soundtrack that just the city came alive, and everything was Beatlemania suddenly. And
that's right. Yeah, that's why that famous photo shoot of the Beatles in Central Park on the horse and carriages. That's why there's only 3 of them, because George was in bed with laryngitis. They wouldn't. It was cold, February, and they wouldn't let him out. So it's funny. Funny. You don't think about, I'm going to snap a picture. Oh, only 3 of them can come. And now it's like, in fact, a dear friend of ours, Nick Matsorkis, in Austin, he was in Aspen, Colorado, and he saw this. I'll send you a photograph of it afterwards, Andrew. It's a picture of like right before the curtain went up at Ed Sullivan that famous Sunday night. And the story goes that this photographer had forgotten there was a photo call for these 4 English fellas called the Beatles or something. And he had his photo pass, and he went in, and they said, oh, well, we're clearing the floor now. Everybody's, going, but you can go upstairs in the balcony and see if you can get, a shot off. And he had 2 frames left on his film. And the first one failed, and the last one is this photograph I'll send you, and it's called Rehearsing for History. And you can see Ed, these huge cameras, the New York policemen with their big navy blue caps, and people winding the film off. And John Lennon is looking up to the balcony, he's looking straight in this photographer's lens. It's the most amazing photo.
I'd love to see that. Thank you. I've never seen that picture.
Yeah, it's called Rehearsing for History. It's a limited edition print thing, but it's just absolutely incredible. It was literally the last frame of photo taken of them before they were instantly world famous.
You talk about timing. That was it.
Yeah. And this guy parked up on the curb and the no parking zone. And he just thought, I'll just run in and see if I can get a shot. And wow, what a shot that is. It's
amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing it.
So here it's a question of, artistic balance. And I know you and Josh probably work on this together, but
can you talk about pieces of, excuse me.
Wrong glasses?
Yeah.
Wrong glasses. Hold, please.
Wrong glasses.
Props, call props.
96-year-old eyeballs.
Yeah. There you
Other,
go.
other glasses, yeah. Can you talk about the process of selecting which performances or moments got highlighted across digital platforms?
Yeah. Well, how do you choose what
How
to
do you,
feature and when?
Well, in today's world, we
Mm.
have 200 playlists up.
Oh,
So that's all these artists, everything they did, or a genre, or
Yeah.
something that now we're in shorts as well. Josh is a master at this. He learned a lot at Google. He traveled for them and really learned how to market and also bring this old world show that is the first basic quarter century of the post-war era. That's
Right.
why it's like a cornerstone to everything that follows.
Yeah.
And, the great stuff, I knew when I saw it, and it was just obvious. And of course, it's the names, but it's, look at the James Brown performance. I mean,
Yeah.
people know that they are on, and this is history, and they're going to do it as well as they can, and it's live, so they can't make mistakes.
Yep.
Things can go wrong, like often happens in novelty acts and stuff. But the great stuff just jumps out at you, and it was, Bo Diddley or, Chubby Checker or, all of these great artists. I mean, a lot of the folk groups were coming over also from,
Yes.
Britain to America. And, the evolution was in television, in music, and popular culture. And Sullivan had that understanding, and he wanted to, make the show global. So he
Yeah.
would spend every summer traveling. He would have his reruns, but he also added footage, especially in the later years where they can just edit it in. And
Yes.
so the shows weren't the same. And there's 1,050 hours, and you start to go through the 1,050 hours, which happened over, there's a few shows missing because there were no kinescopes in the
No.
very beginning.
Yep.
The kinescope, which is just putting a television camera or a 16 millimeter camera up against a television, was an idea that the legal department said the sponsors need to see that their commercials ran, and the ad agencies want to have some proof of it. So they went, oh, that's a good idea. And it was for that reason that the kinescope started. Then it went to 16 millimeter filming so they could cycle the prints and bring other parts of America into watching it.
Right.
And then it went to black and white 2-inch tape in 1958. And in the beginning, it was called Toast of the Town. They didn't want to put his name on it so that if they needed another host to replace him, they could keep the title.
Oh my.
And Ed was very nervous, excuse me, when the sponsor, which was Emerson Radio in the beginning, when they walked after 6 or 8 weeks and said, this guy's never going to make it. And Ed found out that it was being shopped as a show that could be made available to a different sponsor without Ed Sullivan.
Oh
And
my.
that's when he had to work 7 years as Toast of the Town before, in his new negotiation, he said, and now the show that everybody calls the Ed Sullivan Show, I want that on the show. And then they got that.
Wow.
And, so every 7 years, the contracts were, and after, it was in 1964 September when he negotiated a new deal and basically said, I'm tired of being a salaried guy. I want to have my own company. So he set up Sullivan Productions, Inc. And that's when they decided, Bill Paley said, you can have all the shows that you make from that point on. And he said, well, why don't I have the old ones too? And then the talks broke down. And then Paley decided, give him the shows. nobody's going to want to watch old variety shows.
Oh,
And then Ed Sullivan ended up with a whole library, and that was the family treasure. And I, when Bob brought, me into the picture, it was like entrusting it to me. And it is a little bit like a tiny, tiny corner of the Smithsonian or something. People call up, they want the history, they want to know, they want to see. So there's a lot of kind of a service aspect to the show where people have a right to see their own performances. And, we have a very good relationship with the most important part, the talent.
Yes.
It's all about the talent.
wow, the talent. Yeah.
That's right. That's incredible. Our friend Karen from Edinburgh, Scotland is saying, in the UK, there was a show called Oh Boy, which captured the raw energy of live performances. Only ran until May 59, but it set the template for UK future pop shows like Ready, Steady, Go, and later the American show Shindig. Was Ed influenced by any of those other shows as time changed and he was becoming more contemporary with guests, do you think, or he just stuck to his brand?
That's a very good question. I think they were influenced by him, but they were shows that were more specific to music. They didn't have the other genres, a little bit of opera, Maria Callas over here, plate spinners, or Senor Wences, or that famous mouse that came in. Topo Gigio comes in because Walt Disney was put up against, against Sullivan. So somebody at CBS said, if Walt Disney's going to be the competition, Ed needs to work with some puppet or something. So Topo Gigio comes in, and who wrote for Topo Gigio was an American comedian. I don't know if you're as familiar, but she's famous over here as Joan Rivers.
Oh, wow, of course.
And Joan Rivers wrote for Topo. And after a while, she said, Mr. Sullivan, I'm trying to be a comedian. Can I have a chance to step into the spotlight on your stage instead of, just writing the material for you to talk to the puppet? And Topo Gigio is beloved, and Joan Rivers became a superstar.
Oh, my Lord. I never realized she was behind that. And then there was, do you remember Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop?
Yeah, I knew her. She was great. She did an interview with me too. Joan did. Starting in 91, we interviewed a lot of people who sadly are no longer with us, but who played a very important part on the show. And Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, I ran into her with my family in Hawaii. She was so great, and she did an interview as well. She was, there was so much talent for the kids and for the grandparents, and then of course the teenagers and the adults. Ed was trying to satisfy 4 audiences at the same time.
But it's conceivable to think that without Joan Rivers and Topo Gigio, there might not have been such, an entry into the business for Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, right? I mean, one begets the other. Oh, Paul Mooney, our friend from down the block here, he knew Shari. How? Wow. Yeah, Marianne, who would have thought that Joan Rivers did that? Yes, I actually worked with Joan on the closing of the Horn Jazz Club in Santa Monica. It was the last night, and our band was the opener, and Joan was the headliner. It was quite an evening.
Oh, I'm sure. She was so funny. I mean, we had a couple of meetings, and Greg Vines, who's worked with me for years, 40 plus to be honest, and we went to a hotel to just meet with her and have a drink. She wanted to chat, and she was fall down funny. I mean, it was not all prepared material. She was just a natural.
Yeah. And half of it came from her curmudgeonliness, I mean, things would come out of Joan's mouth that not just that night, but in her career, that you would think, God, yes, that's annoyed me for years, but she's now sticking a pin in it. She would find things that'd be like, that is annoying, and I've just never vocalized it.
Yeah.
It was kind of like therapy, wasn't it, with Joan? She would want on your behalf. It was. She was naturally brilliant, and
it's also Jean Carroll was a woman who was the first American comedian to stand on the Sullivan stage. I mean, it was unheard of to have female comedians. And
Yes.
now the most popular comedians pretty much are
Yes.
females, and in music too. You know, some of the most
Yeah.
desired, talent is always they call, get me a diva. You know, they don't want to do as many documentaries as they except when it comes down to, contemporary female stars. They're kind of controlling a lot of the music business, starting, of course, with Taylor Swift and her incredible story. But they all are influenced. I mean,
Absolutely.
the Beatles come up all the time, the Stones come up, and it starts with W.C. Handy being on the show, the father of the blues, all the way to the Jackson Five. And, that arc of American popular culture, music, television history, and is what always appealed to me. And
I didn't realize W.C. Handy had been on the show. I mean, W.C. Handy, who, if you're younger listening to this, gets a shout out in one of the verses of Mark Cohn's Walking in Memphis, fabulous song. But I did not realize that, I mean, the show does stretch back that far, doesn't it?
Yeah, he was known as the father of the blues.
Yes.
And then comes gospel and rhythm and blues, and then out of that comes Motown. And I mean, it's and the relationship with Motown was like as Berry Gordy says in Sunday Best, he said this was a marriage made in heaven. I was trying to get my artists onto television, and Ed made that possible. And the first Motown act was 13-year-old Stevie Wonder in black and white, just before the show goes to color. Yeah, just before the Beatles were on, Stevie Wonder does Fingertips Part 2, and it was a #1, and he broke all the barriers. And then came the Supremes, and then came the Temptations, and then came Smokey Robinson, and I mean, Four Tops and Gladys Knight. I mean, it just is the greatest library because this relationship was so important. And Smokey's work and how Smokey started writing and producing and being such an important artist. And they all talk about it. Sullivan was where to be on Sunday night. I mean, in those days when there were much, much fewer televisions, it was often 30 to 35 million people watching on Sunday night at 8.
Good, great. And they certainly weren't watching 35 million sets. They were all gathered around in groups, right?
Yeah, but it was 35 million people because they averaged probably 4 per house or 3, whatever that number is in the ratings. It would come on, the Nielsen's and the trend ratings in the beginning. And Ed kept his eyes on the ratings. When Steve Allen had Elvis on and humiliated Elvis, Elvis would never watch that film again because Steve Allen had him singing to a hound dog and then doing a candy bar, a Toto bar commercial and stuff that he, put Elvis in, singing to a dog in a tuxedo. And Steve Allen, was really kind of not clearly in favor of rock and roll. But the ratings were so big with Steve Allen that Ed called up Colonel Parker and said, you were offering your boy for $5,000, and I'd like to take you up on it. He said, Mr. Sullivan, that was before this moment.
Wow.
It's not for $5,000. I wanted him on when nobody knew too much about him. And you said no. He said, but now it's $50,000, but he'll appear 3 times. And Ed was going, oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
and
no.
CBS was going, 50,000. Nobody's ever made 50,000. And he got 50,000 for 3 appearances.
Do you think Colonel Tom Parker deliberately allowed Elvis to be humiliated to get those numbers up?
No, I think I knew Colonel Parker very well. And Peter Guralnick, my dear friend, who's the greatest music writer, I think, alive, or at least in the top 5, that's for sure. You know, he's written a book called The Colonel and the King.
Okay.
And it's so interesting because it's much closer to the Colonel Parker I knew, and yet there's so much in there that I never knew about. It explains how he stowed away and came to America, and you know, was 15 years old, and he got to Florida, and they basically threw him back on the ship and sent him back.
He
And
was
he came back, and
right?
no, he was Dutch.
Dutch.
Dutch. Okay, I thought he was from
He was,
Hungary.
yeah, he was Dutch, and he had this dream about America, and he came over, and he never got himself a passport. He never wanted anybody to know that he was from Holland,
Oh
and
my.
that all came out later. I don't think Elvis knew it either. Otherwise, and that's why it's so frustrating that Elvis never got to Britain. But Colonel Parker, who called, you know, was kind of a Kentucky colonel. That's
Right.
what, it was an honorific instead of,
And
you know,
stop.
an earned in the military. And
Oh, yeah.
you know, he didn't have a passport, so Elvis didn't get to travel
Oh my Lord.
outside the country. I mean, he once crossed the border to Canada and did a concert there, but the most he went to was Hawaii.
I
And
was
then,
gonna
of course, he was in Germany, and he wanted to go back and perform and stuff. And Colonel said, no performing in Germany. And the officers at, you know, where he was based said, he really needs to play for the officers. And Colonel Parker said, my boy don't sing for no money. It's not happening. And he wouldn't do any favors. He said, no, he's just going to we're putting out records while he's over there. And when Elvis came back, he was different. In 1960, it had served 2 years.
Yeah.
And when he came back, you know, it was kind of watered down Elvis, who wasn't sure that he was going to find a place in American popular culture. You know, it was the era of the Bobbies and the Billies and, you know, all the teen idols.
And the Rickies, don't forget Ricky Nelson.
And the Ricky. Well, Ricky was selling records.
Oh,
Ricky was a huge star through Ozzie and Harriet, the show that his parents put on.
Yeah. We did a lot of work a few years back now with Matthew and Gunnar, his twin sons, and they've got Nelson is resurrected as are all things rock and roll. And they played a huge, like 35,000 seater gig in Milan, Italy last night. So what's old is new again. They've just done one of these huge rock cruises. They have an interesting thing. So it's the Nelson family hybrid show. They run. They own the Ozzie and Harriet footage archives, and so they run some of that and tell stories about the grandparents because they're the third generation of Billboard #1 and million selling people, you know. And then they play Hello Mary Lou and Garden Party, and then they do After the Rain. They do this whole Nelson family show. It's really, really good. If you see it coming, I think they're coming to. I'll let you know if they're coming to LA. It's really worth seeing. It's a good show.
Yeah,
but
I met them once, and they were kind of trying to figure out how to get the estate working and everything. So they obviously have accomplished that.
I believe they figured it out. I don't get into the management side. I don't talk to them often anymore, but we did help them build their fan club database and do email blasts and fix their websites and all that digital stuff, you know, that Josh world, in other words.
Yeah.
But, so when you talk about, you know, your relationships with people like Bob Precht and whatever in the old days, there are the new folks now, the Ted Sarandoses and the streamers and whatever. How do you know?
What role do no partnerships?
No, what role do
partnerships?
There you go.
Oh,
I'll print it bigger next week.
I'll have to clean them for next week.
Well,
what role do partnerships, whether it's streaming?
Well, we're streaming on Fast a lot. You know, we started with Pluto, which was CBS, and is still CBS connected. And we're on Roku, and we're on Amazon Prime Video. We're on about 5 or 6 Fast platforms. Fast is advertiser-supported television, where you don't actually pay a streamer. We would like to eventually evolve and do other projects with the bigger platforms, obviously, but we wanted to, you know, get moving faster, and that's the way it played out. But we are Josh has done an incredible job of keeping that all going. So
Yes.
that's why some of the numbers you read, it's hard to believe, frankly. And, Brazil is our fourth territory. You see, it's gone global. There's things that happen where an artist in France who was a clown, they discovered that there's footage of him and we have it. And so we're putting stuff up that's attracting a global audience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Ed was
great.
only live in America and in Canada.
Right.
And Wayne and Schuster was on all the time because Canadian acts. And, certain British actors like the comedians Morecambe and Wise, we assisted them on a project. They were on about 13, 15 times. Ed loved them.
Really?
And then, Ben Stiller did a movie last year called Nothing is Lost, all about his parents. And I found it fascinating because his father was
Jerry.
Jewish and his mother was Catholic.
Uh-huh.
And Ed was Catholic and his wife was Jewish.
Oh.
And the Stiller connection and them rehearsing, and Ben talks about the fact that he didn't know whether they were fighting or working on new material or what was happening in the other room, but it was representative of something going on that, he thought was dysfunctional maybe in the family, but it was them preparing the material.
That's
And
funny.
Ed had this love of them, and they were on 36 times. And it turns out that, it was great for them, and they became American icons. And Ben is absolutely brilliant. And he and his sister tell the story in a way that I don't think we've ever heard it before. It's called Nothing is Lost because the father taped everything.
Wow.
And, and she and Mira was a brilliant, brilliant mind. And the two of them, they had the chemistry and they saved everything. And Ben finds this archive basically as he's cleaning up the place they lived after their passing.
Wow. I mean, maybe that's a perfect recipe for comedians and commentators, because Bill Maher's parents, he has one Catholic and one Jewish parent.
Yes, true.
Bill Maher's in the same boat. Maybe it just shapes a kid differently when they hear, both sides of the argument at the Saturday or Sunday dinner table, or both.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You never know. So you guys are crazy busy all the time.
But outside of the business, do you have any free time to pursue any interests or pastimes?
Oh yeah. I love to do things that appeal to me. It is, of course, a passion. This thing that I've been fortunate enough to be involved with is the gift that keeps on giving. Because, to be honest, there's not a person I know, and no one at the office or anything, or in the company, has watched the 1,050 hours.
No.
And we have done a deeper dive now since Josh has been CEO than ever before. So we keep coming up. And there's some new Sammy Davis Jr. piece I just saw. And, we always gravitated towards the big names and the key performances. And it's like most libraries are like 10 to 20% is what's really usable, and the rest is not quite there. Right. Well, the ratio is much better in Sullivan, and it's a great pleasure to be involved with it. It's like having an adult sandbox to play in all the time. You're finding stuff, and we're finding stuff by deep dives, and people are calling and asking for things to be licensed that we go hunt down, but we are constantly drilling down and finding additional gems, additional performances. I'd like to have medleys often with the number one hits or the top hits of an artist.
Sure.
And then other times the artist said, no, I would like to introduce a new song and see if it can become a hit. So that was another way that Ed was so important. So it works like that. But I have a lot of other interests and passions, and one of them is olive oil and wine, which we do as a family.
Oh,
We have a place, up in a canyon behind Solvang, which is the
yeah.
little Danish community up in San Ynez area, and my mother-in-law lives up there. And I have a lot of interests other than this. I mean, I'm interested really in popular culture, history, music. There's a fantastic new book about how the Beatles and Bob Dylan influenced
Oh, yes.
one another. Oh my gosh.
We had the author on 3 weeks ago.
Oh, you did?
I'll send you the link. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Because
Yeah.
the book is incredible. And
It is.
I always knew they influenced each other to some extent. You hide your love away, and you get the sense, that they are. But he tells that tale, and it all ties to everything that happened. And what Sullivan does, it's kind of the cornerstone of the music that followed in other decades, and that's where we're headed. We want to keep it alive by bringing it to a younger audience all the time, and make sure that people understand that this is the first quarter century, more or less, 23 years. And then there's, the 70s after Michael Jackson, and the show is canceled, or the Jackson 5, I should say.
Sure.
And then you get the amazing music of the 70s, and then you get the 80s, then you get the 90s, and it's 8 or so decades.
Yeah.
And it brings you to the present tense.
Yeah.
And also the comedians are influenced by the other comedians, like Kevin Hart is talking always about,
Richard
George
Pryor.
Carlin and Richard Pryor. Yeah.
Eddie Murphy's beginnings. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we had Jim Windolf on. The book is called Where the Music Had to Go. And it's a really fascinating side-by-side comparison of, they had, the Beatles and Bob Dylan had a bit of a sort of back and forth writing spat going for a little bit there. And, when they finally met, of course, all's fair in love and war. But he draws, Where the Music Had to Go is you're absolutely right, Andrew. It's a great.
Yeah, I learned a lot from that book.
Yeah, no, I'll send you the episode. You'll enjoy it.
I'd love to see it. And the guy came up with it and thought this out, and then shows you how it happened. And it's just fascinating, these kinds of things. There's so much going on. I feel, honestly, like I'm living in the future. I think the 21st century is so different. And whether you're doing it, because it's digital, or how we're talking to each other now, it's just remarkable. I mean, the cameras used to be this size, and you could barely move the thing. But Sullivan was stated, exactly. But Sullivan, because it had such a big audience, when there were 3 cameras on most shows, he had 6, and they had the budget for it. Oh yeah, they made sure that the show had everything in, highest quality audio, and doing things as well, state of the art at the time. Today it's old fare, but we have machines here in the office that we transfer material on. We've made many copies, because after 9/11, I thought to myself, my God, if it had happened here and suddenly everything was gone. So we've, placed tapes and copies and masters in different places. So it's saved no matter what. I mean, it is American history.
That was one of the tragedies that hit the Nelson family when Universal Backlot went on fire. They lost the masters to Ozzie and Harriet.
Oh my God.
Ricky's Records, Universal Music, all the master 2-inch BASF, tape, and the Nelson albums. So they have copies, but all the masters burnt.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Gunnar came, he wanted to do a whole documentary piece on it, whatever. He wanted to call it The Day the Music Fried.
Oh God.
But yeah, can you imagine being, the third generation, and all of a sudden you find out that your parents and your grandparents' stuff, and their Uncle David, David Nelson, Ricky's brother, was a big part of the Ozzie and Harriet show.
Yeah.
It all went up in flames in one day, and nobody had thought to, make high. Oh my lordy!
Do you remember what happened with Johnny Carson over here?
No.
Well, he was doing his shows for years and years, and then he finds out that somebody in business affairs, a bean counter, decided that they should tape over all the 2-inch tapes. 3,000 shows that Johnny Carson did, including the one with the Beatles in 1968, when they come with the Apple and they explain that they're starting this new company and there's Apple and whatever. All of these 3,000 shows disappeared. They did this also at ABC, and Dick Cavett saved his library from a dumpster because a guy called and said they're throwing out all the tapes. And he rushed there with, market baskets, and they were moving them and saving them. CBS didn't do it. CBS had a policy of saving it in Fort Lee, New Jersey. And CBS, because of Paley and the broadcast history and the Museum of Broadcasting, before it became the Paley, they protected their library, and that's where we got it from, Fort Lee, and that became condos. I mean, everything changes, but one really has to go about, doing what Marty Scorsese did with the movies. Keep the quality, keep the art, protect it, fix it, save it. And that's what, in a weird way, we're doing with television. Because, this is something, a story about how it's lost is heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing that and having the vision to do it, and your wonderful son and your wonderful staff, and just really preserving it for not just for us now to watch, but future generations. Because once it's in the cloud and digitized, hopefully it's there forever, unless the server farm, takes a dump. But you sound like you guys have it all backed up 8 ways from Sunday, which is fantastic. So as you look to the future, what are your personal and professional hopes for the whole business? Do you hope that more people will go back and realize the value of what they have and start archiving it?
You mean non-Sullivan or Sullivan?
Yeah, no, non-Sullivan. People in general, like, the Nelson family, or we're friends with John Carter Cash, and I know he's got the Cash Cabinet studio, and I think because of people like you and Josh, people are realizing now, oh boy, it's not just the monetary value. Yes, you have to run a business. Yes, you have to pay your bills, but I mean, I'm sure you'll agree that it's the intrinsic and the artistic and just the humanistic value of being able to say, I had that, I saved it, and here it is.
I mean, I think it's a responsibility.
Okay.
I think it comes with the turf. I mean, from the beginning, we transferred it. You couldn't see the Sullivan stuff. It wasn't available. If you wanted to license something, you had to have it taken to a lab. You had to pay for it to be done, and then you work it out with them. It wasn't, when we brought it out from New York or New Jersey, it came in a huge 18-wheeler truck. And I had put aside $30,000 for this truck to come. And after it was filled up with stuff, the guy comes over to me and says, there's so much weight with all these 2 inches and all these kinescopes and 16 and all the different formats, and some of it was a copy of a copy. Anyway, he said, it's too much weight on the axles. You need another truck.
Oh, no.
I said, oh, are you kidding? You're kidding. And anyway, 2 trucks came out. They had their wives with them, these guys. So they had one of them had a dog, and there were 2 families. They drove it out here in 3 days. They just took turns. One slept in the other, and it arrived here. Yeah. And we filmed the unloading of it. And, it was just so exciting, and it was really something, and it was a joy. It's been an absolute joy. It has changed our lives. in a
Oh,
wonderful way. And I always, as I said, loved history, especially pop culture and history of music and television. And this combines all of that. And it's a window into America, and it's
yeah.
constantly alive. It's
Yes.
more alive and seen by more people today than ever before. And I remember Bob Precht saying the key is to keep it alive and to protect it. And in effect, we were entrusted with this library. I never came up with the idea of like, how can I get this thing? It was like he said, "Oh, this guy's worked with John Lennon. This guy's worked with Elvis. This guy's worked with the history of rock and roll, and this guy, loves the music and knows how to deal and has done a film with the Rolling Stones." And he said there was nobody else who he could think of, and he didn't want to do it anymore. And when we got involved, he moved to Montana from LA, and he lived the life he wanted to live. And he was a brilliant man, brilliant guy. He was a captain of his own ship in San Diego. He spoke perfect Russian. He took up and when he was in Missoula, Montana, he took up the cello and played it for an hour or two every day. And I was like, and he was great at tennis. He loved tennis.
Oh, my Lord.
And my father-in-law was a tennis nut, and he was also, he won Wimbledon, and my wife's father, and
good God, what's his name? What was his name?
Robert Falkenberg. He won doubles with Jack Kramer in 47, and he won singles in 48. And Claudia and I had the good fortune to go to Wimbledon for many, 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 many years and use the family tickets because Bob got to choose the tickets on court one. And, we could go into the club and all that. We had to put on our tie and do the thing. But it's all different now. It's all on a phone. And he was the longest living member of the Wimbledon club. Wow. And when he passed in 22, and eventually you lose the tickets, but we only had him he had him for 75 years.
Good grief. Well, yeah, and you're the first, I mean, I know you're born in England, but you're the first sort of Americanized resident that actually I've ever heard pronounce Wimbledon with a D correctly. Because if I hear somebody say Wimbledon, I just want to say, why I order, February in Wimbledon. Exactly.
Yeah. My wife too. When they say Wimbledon, and everybody here says Wimbledon, and you just have to look at the spelling.
Yeah, well, you'd think, but
never mind.
There's an R in the middle of February, but nobody ever uses it either. So what are you gonna do? Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
You can see going across the bottom, go to edsullivan.com. You will also find a big button there about Sofa Entertainment and all the fantastic work that Andrew and Josh and the whole team over there are doing, Debbie and Candace and everyone. I cannot thank you enough. This has been an absolute education for us and a joy. Well, and it's been a
pleasure for me. And you guys are amazing. I don't know what you do, but you have so many things going on. It's remarkable.
Well,
it's just a real discovery, and all of the different websites and things. I mean, what are you juggling? What place are you juggling today?
Yeah, we're digital jugglers. We, organic tea company.
Good.
So one of the things is that you won't know that one of Angie's books is called Mrs. McCartney's Liverpool Limericks and Other Random Irish Haikus. And so we put pen to paper over the weekend, and we wrote you your personal limerick. So if you're sitting comfortably, we will close
the show. And if my glasses are clean.
And if your glasses are clean. So you count it in at the speed you would like, Madame.
Very good. 1, 2, 3.
We so enjoyed archivist Solt, whose stories of legends were told. From Ed Sullivan's stage, my mistake, start again.
Okay,
do it
from the top.
It's not live TV, don't worry, but it is. And a 1, 2, 3. We so enjoyed archivist Solt, whose stories of legends were told. From Ed Sullivan's stage to rock's golden age, His sofa shows shimmer like
like
gold.
gold.
Ta-da!
I took it up again, John.
Perfect way to end it. It was a pleasure meeting
Thank-
you, and keep up the great work.
Thank
I
you.
will, and I will send you the picture called Rehearsing for History, the last shot before the curtain went up, and I will also send you
Oh.
the Jim Windolf TeaFlix link about the Bob Dylan Beatles book
Beautiful.
called
Yes,
Where
thank
the
you.
Music Had to Go. Thank you. And again, if there's anything historical fact-wise that you may think we may be able to help with Debbie or any research of anything you're doing, we are but a cup of tea and a phone call away.
Thank you very much. This was a pleasure.
Thank you,
Great
sir.
meeting you. Thank you.
You bet. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye
Take
now.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to TeaFlix, and check out Dr. Angie's books, Organic Teas and CBD, at mrsmccartneysteas.com. Toodle pip.